Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Saturday's game represents the end of an imaginary, though still important, stretch for the Red Raiders. If they're able to get a win, what will it mean? We're into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks as always for making us your first listen. And a few things to dive into today as we get set for the Red Raiders and the Baylor Bears coming to town Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock kick from Jones Stadium. And we'll take a listen to Baylor head coach Dave Aranda on a couple of different things coming up in just a bit. Want to get to a quarterback that we are familiar with in the 806 in Sawyer Robertson, and also some thoughts from Aranda on what this series has involved over the last couple of years, obviously since you had the crossover with Joey McGuire coming from Waco to become Texas Tech's head coach. Some interesting and varied results, you would have to say, and we'll get into that coming up in just a moment. But first, Chris, wanted to take a listen here to the home team, and that being number 28, Taj Brooks, talking about what the Red Raiders also have on the line coming up this weekend, and that is the arrival in an earlier fashion than what we have seen in some recent years of bowl eligibility and what that would mean for the Red Raiders. Here is Taj Brooks.
It means too much in our program. You know, the last few years we kind of been fighting to get bowl eligible, but now we're in a race, something that's bigger than bowl eligible. It's trying to get to the Big 12 championship, and that's something we preach as a room and as a culture and as captains. We preach that to the guys, and just really just staying consistent, going each week, trying to go 1-0, and just that's it. So.
Chris, I know that they have much higher aspirations, like he's talking about right there, but I'd have to believe if you can get a win or get this out of the way earlier on in the year than you have over the last couple of years, there has to be a little bit of pressure, I would think, taken off the team, at least in that one small regard. What do you think?
It's going to be a situation where it is something you and I are going to talk about, and I think it's because right now I was just looking to make sure, but BYU and Iowa State have already hit that mark. I think obviously Texas Tech has a chance to do that this weekend, as does Kansas State, as does Arizona State, a team that you've already beaten, and you can cross that off the list this weekend with wins by those three teams. But I think he hits it on the head. It's like, man, that's the last thing. We're looking at much bigger stuff, and yeah, that's a byproduct of what we're in the middle of right now, and that's kind of fun to think about because the last several years you've kind of had to hurry to get to that point, and like, you know, like, oh man, you got to do this down the stretch to get to that point. And I think you finished with a sense of urgency in the last 2 years to propel yourself to that and earn the right to continue to play. But this feels a lot different because that's the last thing you're going to want to really think about when if you score more than Baylor on Saturday, because my first thing will be not that, okay, you're going to play an extra game or you've guaranteed yourself bowl eligibility, but you're going to win on Saturday. I'm going to start to scoreboard watch. I'm going to start to really pay attention to what else is going on and who's in this race. What surprising results do we get? More so than normal. I'm always interested in the league games, but maybe more so if you continue to stay in this thing. And, you know, it's crazy because you've got three teams that are undefeated in the league, you being one of them. But then you've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more with just the one loss. So you've got basically 8 of the 16 teams are very much in this deal. And you are one of the very few with just 2 others that essentially controls your own destiny. But it would be nice to sit here in mid-October and go, yeah, okay, of course we're going to go play an extra game. But right now, man, it's all about in the moment. It's all about trying to just score more than Baylor, and then with eyes on having a chance to be in Arlington in early December.
I think once upon a time, particularly going back to the Mike Leach era, it was just a foregone conclusion that you would
Right.
wrap up bowl eligibility pretty quickly. A lot of that having to do that basically you had 4 cupcake wins before you'd even kind of broken a sweat or whatever in a lot of those seasons. Obviously, the schedule changes with 9 conference games, 3 non-conference games, and now the non-conference is not even made in the same fashion. But I think it'd be great to see Texas Tech get that out of the way. And I think there's also 2 other things you could sort of check off of your offseason wish list if you're able to get a win on Saturday against Baylor, because we made a big deal about, and Coach McGuire made a big deal about it. It wasn't just us, but wanting to get off to a much better start to the year in general. And though the first 2 weeks were a little rocky as you start out 1-1 and neither one really felt great, even the win you got, you were kind of like, yikes, what does this mean for the season? But now that we look back at it, maybe feeling a little bit better about what you were able to do in totality through the first 6 ball games. But there was another part of starting well to the year that involved your first 7 games at large. And we talked about the opportunity you had because 5 of those 7 were going to be playing on your home field. And we're approaching number 7. And if you're able to get a win against Baylor, you start out 6-1. I know we all would like a do-over in Pullman, Washington. We're not going to get it, though. I feel like you'd check that box also. You've sort of already gotten off to that better start that you were looking for, certainly compared to the last couple of seasons. But I would also have to say, if you get this win against Baylor, you did take advantage of having a favorable, in the form of where the games are played, favorable start to the year with so many being played in Lubbock. So it's sort of just an imaginary, I guess, line to cross. But it is one we talked a lot about this offseason, and this sort of represents the end of that stretch on Saturday against Baylor.
Yeah, and I think you're still probably paying the price in the court of public opinion for your slow start, which ultimately was just 1-1 on the year, but it was kind of how you got to those results and things like that. And you know what? We may look back on this deal and think or realize, man, that maybe was one of the best things that could have happened to you. You got shaken up early and you were left for dead by a lot of folks. There's a lot of folks that after that Washington State game and even after the ACU game, they were going, I see 2 or 3 more wins the rest of the year. And I read it like you did. I saw it and I was told it by like you were. And here to think that you've righted the ship a bit, and yet you haven't put it all together yet. Baylor's coming in saying the same thing. And again, we've touched on this too. Some teams never do. Some teams never get
Sure.
get it all put together in any one season. You can put together a half or a quarter or whatever it may be. But that's you're right. And I think that's why you hate to say it, but we're just going to get it out in the open here. The pressure is all on you in this game. It really is. Baylor may be coming in with different kinds of pressure and coaching jobs and all that stuff, but the pressure's on you. One, because you are in a league race. You're at home. You don't have that many opportunities left at home. And in a race where there's not much margin for error, you've got to take advantage of these because you're only going to get so many more. And the Colorado and West Virginia games are not going to be easy at all either, much less the 2 road games you have coming up in Fort Worth and in Ames, Iowa.
Yeah.
So the pressure is on you because this is call it what it is. It's not going to be easy, but it's a winnable game, and you need to take advantage of it to do what you ultimately set out to do, was that 7-0/6-1 start. And you've gotten here a little bit differently than we may have thought, if you can get to that point, because I think we all agreed that maybe the Washington State game is the one you get. The Arizona game, oh man, I'm not sure you're gonna be able to get that one. But either way, and in this way, it's maybe worked out better for your conference standing. So, but the pressure's on you in this one. But it certainly need to check that box and then move on and let somebody else worry about Baylor getting right.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if you had the exact same record, but you swapped your road wins, we'd be feeling worse right now, wouldn't we? And I know how bad it felt coming out of Pullman, but if you could only get one, which a lot of people had pegged coming into the year, I think that way, I sort of feel better about the way it went. I don't know. I feel goofy even saying that, but I don't think
it's right.
I like the fact that you stuck 4 in a row. You get a little momentum.
you'd have been sitting in it for after the loss too. You'd been sitting in it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It would have felt like, oh man, because we would have sitting here and been talking about, boy, you don't have many opportunities left, and now some of your margin for error is now gone. And you'd have sat around and stewed about it, the whole deal. But sports are funny, man. And
in general, I guess a conference win more valuable than a non-conference win. So you'd probably rather have that one anyway. If you could only get one, both would have been nice. But here we are getting ready for the Bears with only one loss on the resume to this point in time. This series has been an interesting one over the last couple of years. You've had some extreme variation in the results, home and away. The road team has had the success over the last couple of years. We're hoping that changes coming into the weekend. Let's take a listen to Baylor head coach Dave Aranda talking about the last time they came to Lubbock and really what's gone down over the last 2 seasons between these teams. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching the game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. Let's take a listen to Baylor head coach Dave Aranda talking about the last time they came to Lubbock and really what's gone down over the last 2 seasons between these teams.
We've watched that game, a couple times, we've watched last year's game, which was the opposite of that, and I think the things that hold true there are the truths that are evident in both of those games is that if we can get ahead of the sticks, their tempo slows down, and we can get them into third and gotta-throw situations. I think 2 years ago we were able to do that, had a bunch of picks because it was, third and gotta-throw. Last year we struggled with big plays, and we struggled to defend the run. And so we were never really able to get in those situations. And I think, that's true with most offenses. It's clearly true with these guys, particularly this year. They're running it more than they usually run it. That is a difference from 2 years ago, is that there's a fair amount of just throw, and now it's more run. And so I think the opportunity to kind of hone in on that and play complementary football, get the ball back to our offense is clearly there.
Something we heard also from Joey McGuire, Chris, staying ahead of the sticks, avoid getting behind them. I think Tech has done a better job as the season has gone along. You just look at some of the average third down distances needed to convert a first down. But that's obviously been a theme and will be a theme for both these teams coming into the weekend.
Yeah, it's funny. I hear I think Dave Aranda and Joey McGuire may have been saying it simultaneously on Monday at different times or early in the week when they did their press conferences about staying ahead of the sticks, and which means, in football jargon, that's like, hey, we got to stay on schedule, and it's be good on first and second down, so everything's manageable, because then it keeps the playbook open, and you're not showing your hand on, okay, we 3rd and 9, probably gonna have to chunk it here down the field and all those things. I just think Taj played so well in Waco last year that it opened everything up, and you were able to go down the field some in that game. Coy Aiken had a big touchdown catch in Waco last year. There was the one interception that Barron where he just, he tried to throw it as far as he could, and it just way underthrown, but it opened up everything, and Taj just kind of took that game over, and your offensive line did. And I think your defensive line took that game over as well. If we remember that, this was Charles Esters and Duda Banks really having some coming out parties, and it may have had something to do with Baylor's offensive line, but they never got comfortable. It was that was a trenches game last year and the year before. And I think that the team that won the game won the trenches on both sides of the ball. And it's funny because you the last 2 games have been blowouts won by the road team, which are rare. And I think before that, it's been a lot of close games. I think about the 2 games before. It was Sir Roderick, kind of going down at the 2-yard line, and you kick the field goal to win it with not much time left. The year before, I believe, was I think I'm right in this year was it the Jet Duffy weird fumble, or was this even Baylor's conference championship year where you're playing at the tail end of the year in the cold and you have a field goal that could have tied it, won it, whatever. It was from 50 plus. And
I think that was just before.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I
So
think you had it right the first time.
your last two games in Waco have been kind of weird, close games. And then I think before that you were playing in the Metroplex. But this has been a fairly competitive series, except for the last 2 years. And I think Vegas is telling you right now, on paper anyway, they expect it to be another one with the Red Raiders favored by 6 or 7 points, give or take. So, and Joey McGuire said something, because for all of Baylor's warts, they haven't been able to run the ball. They've had an injury at quarterback, so they've switched in. And we'll talk about Sawyer Robertson in a little bit. But I just think about Joey saying something on a radio interview he was doing, and I think he's right here, is that this just speaks to kind of how a season can change or how close you can get and then just feel miserable, which is if Cincinnati would have made their field goal a couple weeks ago, or you swap the road wins in order, how differently things feel. But I mean, Baylor played Colorado's socks off, if not for a miracle play, which borderline miracle. They contained one of the best quarterbacks in the country, large in part, most of the night. And then they just have a few plays at the end of a game, and then it turned, and they haven't really been able to get it back. But I mean, it's just is right there. So they have the capability. Oh, yeah. Now you're going to throw a bit of a different test at them. Colorado can't run it. Iowa State, I thought, run it all over Baylor. So, I mean, maybe you'll have some success there, but they've obviously had a bye week as well. But it's just that the margins here are razor thin at times.
Yeah, not just the Hail Mary that people remember, but you remember the way that Baylor actually lost the game. You want to talk about a millimeter at the goal line. They're going in for a score or they're losing the game. And by a millimeter, they lose the game whenever you got the Baylor fumble there at the goal line to bring it to a close in Boulder that night. One of the best games that we've seen in college football this season. But I mean, I don't know how many times we've said it. Probably hadn't even said it enough, even though we've said it over and over. You better not be sleeping on this one just based on the record, because it's one of those that could definitely bite you. You know, before we get to Sawyer Robertson, I'm trying to figure out what I'm making of Texas Tech as a third down team after the trip to Tucson, because you'd actually been one of the best in the nation as far as what you were doing on third down. I think a lot of that speaks to what you do on first and second down, obviously, and setting yourself up in favorable positions. But then it was rough on third down for either team in Tucson, which Arizona had been one of the worst in the nation coming into that game. So that wasn't atypical for them. But the two teams combined for 5 for 25 on third down that night in Tucson. Texas Tech was 2 for 11 to their credit. I'm hoping that was just a one-off, I guess, and maybe was not something we're going to see continue to play out, because prior to that, you'd actually been pretty good and one of the better teams in the country.
And this is what it comes down to with managing or being ahead of the sticks, manageable third downs. I think that's exactly why Joey pointed it out, and I think that's exactly why Coach Aranda pointed out on his end of it, or the way that the previous games had gone, and that's why. What's the most important thing with your offense? Well, it is being able to run it, because it opens up everything else. And you are going to intentionally run it early in series to try to, because, I mean, Taj is a walking 5-yard gain. That's the beauty of his game, is for all the knocks about he's not going to hit you for 60 or 80 or whatever. He's, and that's why I think after what was it, I want to say maybe it was the North Texas game, when you at halftime, it's like you're just blowing up on these guys. But all Joey wanted to talk about was how many negative or no gain runs they'd had, because those show up in games like this now. You can't have too many of those, because then, okay, it's like, well, that play, just throw that one out. But now you're sitting at 3rd and 10 instead of 3rd and 5. And that's where some of these manageable third downs show up. And I think that's where, in this upcoming month, a guy like Jalen Conyers and, John Carlos Miller and Mason Tharp, they're going to need to show up big here. And it was talked about earlier in the week, but I think Zach Kitley was asked about it. I think Joey McGuire was asked about it. But you've had too many drops, and I think it's you've lived to tell about it. But for Barron's completion percentage and for the play caller that take a lot of grief and a lot of there's been way too many drops here on balls that should have been caught, that are the right plays called, the throw is made, and Barron hasn't been perfect. He's overthrown and underthrown some of this stuff too. Don't get me wrong, but that's just one of the things that we've kind of glossed over a little bit. And you can't have some of that when the margins are razor thin, especially on some of these third downs. You can't. You're going to need some guys to make really good catches, much less the ones that are delivered right at the numbers.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's get to, before we get out of here, the Baylor QB, who we are familiar with in the LBK, Sawyer Robertson. And I want to take a listen to Dave Aranda talking about his QB. First, today's episode brought to you by Hims. Sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready and at attention. Hims provides access to treatments that can help you stay ready for the call of duty anytime, giving you the boost of confidence you need to be at your best. Ever feel like you need a little boost? It's time to stop worrying and get Hims. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Plus, the process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized treatment options at hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See our website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. I want to take a listen to Dave Aranda talking about his QB.
For him, like the leadership part, I think going back to when it was going to be this quarterback or that quarterback, I think all of that's hard. And when that's not you two times, and then I think when it does become you and you take the reins and you do your thing, it's almost kind of independent of just, hey, this is my thing now. You just kind of think, hey, this is a job I got to do, this is what I got to do. And so you do have to settle into, hey, this is my thing now, right? I'm not renting this, I own it now. And so I think that I do believe that takes a little bit, even though everyone was waiting for him to do that, I think he's been able to do that. I think he's done that with his play. Some of the runs that you've seen him run, the emotion that he's shown for other guys making plays and whatnot. And he's shown it being up in the film room, watching tape all the time, getting guys to come watch tape. And then he's shown it, we had competition today of 2-minute back and forth, defense and offense. And offense got the better in the first half, and defense was able to come back in the second half. And he goes over the defense because guys way to respond and all that sort of thing. And so he's the guy that's going across and doing all of it. And so I think he's very well adjusted. He always was a leader, but he's taken that role of the leader, and that's really good to see.
I think Robertson's got to be another guy too, Chris, that we will put in a similar category to others we've faced already this year, where got to be a little extra chip on the shoulder, don't you think, coming back to the hometown and taking on the Red Raiders?
Yeah, I don't know what his mindset will be. I mean, this obviously Maverick MacGyver came in, and you would think that he kind of came in and was like, okay, and I thought he had the game of his life. That there are situations where a guy can try to do too much and be way too amped up and overthrowing and just not very accurate. And then there's times where it's like, okay, I'm in front of a lot of friends and family. I'm going to play the best game that I've ever had. I don't, maybe it's somewhere in between, but it can work for you or against you, and we'll see. And I think Texas Tech's probably expecting that he would come in and try to play really, really well and be sharp and all those things. Even though it's not even the same staff that was here that was part of that decision.
Yeah.
But he may be wanting to just outduel Baron Morton, who was chosen over him. That's just the way. That's the reality of it. That's the choice that Matt Wells and David Yost and everybody at the time that's who they selected, and I think that's worked out pretty well for Texas Tech. Because I think Sawyer he's got a lot of moxie. Sometimes the completion percentages aren't necessarily there. He doesn't handle pressure very well. At times, most quarterbacks don't, but he overcomes a lot of things because he's athletic, he's big, he makes plays. I think he's gotten better as the season has gone along, and now that he's kind of settling in, I don't know what happens when Finn, who I think had won that job out of camp, the kid from Toledo that they brought in that was thought to be, this is going to be an interesting addition to the QB room. I don't know what happens when he gets healthy, or if he already is. It's a shoulder separation or shoulder injury that he's dealing with. But this is clearly Sawyer's team, and right now, and I think that's what Coach Aranda is talking about. He's like, now he's kind of settling in as the leader. This is his toy to play with, and he's now feels the ability to be able to speak up and encourage or correct or whatever. And that's a different thing. It's kind of like Barron when Shuck left.
Thinking the same thing, yeah.
Same premise, and you just kind of grow into yourself. Now Finn is still sitting there, and he's still on the mend maybe, but no, this will be an interesting. And he can run. I think that's probably what scares Tim's group the most, or concerns them, is that this is a player that will tuck it and move the chains, and this is what has given Tech some problems at times. So push the Mike Dingle button a lot in this game if you want to. But and I do think your secondary is getting better. There's been some pieces that have been moved around on the back end. I think you'll be healthier in this game. We'll see about Chapman Lewis. But I do think you've improved there. And I think maybe now you've figured out maybe a bit more of the running, because, Noah Fafita only hit you really one time where he punished you on a run. Other than that, you were around him. And that dude is extremely athletic. And I don't think that Levitt and Sorsby killed you that way either. They moved the chains a little bit and they hurt you on occasion, but I think you want to just contain that aspect. But, like the rest of these teams you've played, Baylor's got some serious skill that will punish you. Where they have really struggled, though, is they've really struggled to run the football with any level of consistency. And this is something that I'm sure they've worked on a ton over the last couple of weeks. They run a lot of the RPO stuff that you do, but it doesn't work near as well whenever you just can't run the football. And they've struggled with that, whether it be the back or the offensive lineman, and the combo blocks that Aranda's talked about. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that.
I'm really curious, too, to see if Texas Tech actually found something whenever it comes to pressuring a quarterback against the Wildcats that can be replicated or duplicated. Was it just something that matchup was maybe presenting to them, or was it just Arizona's offensive line that wasn't figuring things out? But, man, it was right out of the gates where you were getting licks in on Arizona's QB, and it really continued throughout the night. And that was one of those things that was like, whoa, okay, who are these guys in these red and black uniforms this time around? Because I hadn't seen these guys do a whole lot of this up to that point in the season. Do you think that was more matchup contingent, or do you think maybe they figured some things out? Were they trying some new things? What did you see there? Because it was successful.
I don't think it was matchup because I think on paper Arizona's offensive line is better than Baylor's. I mean, Arizona's got a potential NFL draft pick at one of the tackle spots. Baylor doesn't have anybody like this. Baylor, I think, is going to start a redshirt freshman at center. There's a sophomore that starts. I mean, it's a semi-young group up front, maybe similar to yours, and even in comparison, you would have a lot more experience up front. But I think that it's not. I think you just maybe started to find something a little bit, and maybe there was more of a sense of urgency there. And now you'll have a few more pieces at your disposal to play, one would think, with Amir Washington and Isaac Smith coming back and those things. But it's just about Tim developing his side of the ball and figuring out what pieces to use when. And because I go back to what we talked about earlier in the week, if you can't communicate correctly, and this goes for the guys up front, because I think we were talking about it in terms of the secondary, but if you can't communicate correctly, or we deem that you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, and if you aren't tackling well, off you go like somebody else. And he's got a lot of options to work in the mix, and that creates competitiveness and depth and all those things, because he's not beholden to having to play, well, I know he's tired, I know he screwed some stuff up, but it's the best we got. No, he doesn't have to say that now. And I think that's something too. But I just it could be a lot of fun, because this is what I think they envisioned way back in August, and maybe some of what they thought they saw in August that wasn't anywhere near what we saw in the first 2 weeks specifically. But this is the depth being unleashed. This is them understanding their role. Nobody's got an ego, and we're just sending, you're sending a lot of depth and athleticism at people in waves, and you're sending confusion now and that's one thing that, Sawyer Robertson probably hadn't seen, because Iowa State's defense is very good, but they give you the same picture. They just execute so well. Tim will try to muddy that picture a lot. And when the ball snapped, it's like, okay, you think you saw this, and now we're going to shift into that. And he's able to, I think, employ some of that more now.
Well, and it's crazy that we saw the success that we did in Tucson, and we're talking about throwing some depth at folks where you were down 2 of your frontline guys, at least as far as the box is concerned, and expecting to see them back in the mix coming up on Saturday in Washington and Smith. Man, can't wait to get back around to it, 3:00 Saturday afternoon for a homecoming fandango from Jones Stadium. Chris, we got a couple more fandangos here this week before we send them off to the weekend. So looking forward to that, man. Appreciate the time as always. Enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one.
We'll see you or see some folks out of Rudy's tonight. I believe we've got some defensive flavor on the show tonight, so looking forward to that. And yeah, man, getting closer, and the weather's changing, so that means that the football is a little more meaningful when the weather starts to change, certainly. But yeah, appreciate the time. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow.
Also hoping to have something resembling physicality when the weather changes, and Texas Tech, I think, has had that so far this season. So that's a good thing, and hopefully will continue to be. Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Try on the Matador Mob if you are interested in going back and forth directly with Chris and myself. It's your direct line to Chris and myself, with text messages coming one-on-one straight to your phone. Even if you want to be like our guy Justin Matador Mobster, who is just asking, Chris, will you be my Facebook friend? If you just want to try it on just to put in a Facebook request, that avenue is there for you also. Hit the show notes to find the link, and you can try on a free 14-day trial. Thanks to those who are chopping it up with us regularly there, and those of you who are partying in the YouTube comments, appreciate you as well, particularly those everydayers out there. Thanks so much for all of the time and participation. For Chris, I'm Casey. Appreciate you, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.